The other two things that I think big leadership mistakes people make is, as a leader, your job is to absorb as much blame as possible and to deflect as much credit as possible. And not in a manipulative way, but if you're being honest, if something, you know, no one's an island, right? So if your team is executing on a plan, even if it's your plan, your strategy, your tactics, they're the ones doing the work. They deserve a lot of the credit, even if it's your strategy. And not only that, but if you can integrate them into developing the strategy, even if you're the driving force behind it, they're going to feel a lot more invested in it, in getting the right outcome. The other thing is, when things go wrong, by definition, if I'm the leader, it's my fault. I hired wrong. They didn't have the right resources. They didn't have the right training. Like, at the end of the day, it's always my fault. So I try to absorb as much blame, deflect as much credit. And if you do that, your team will love you.
All right, we are live. We are live today, and we have a fresh guest. His name is Dave Guttman from Guttman Media. I met him about a few weeks back, and he's inspired me about the concept of life maxing. And I've been using the words token maxing. I've been using various other maxing. There's a love maxing, there's a looks maxing, there's a gym maxing. It was the first time that Dave introduced me the word life maxing. So we'll touch upon that. We'll touch upon his own journey. So, David, should I call you Dave or David? What do you usually go by?
Preference for Dave. The only one who calls me Davey is my dad. So yeah, Dave is fine.
Dave. All right. So, Dave, welcome to the podcast. We'll talk about life maxing and building in the AI era. So, Dave, maybe if you, in few words, if you could describe your journey. You've been a mentor to many of the CEOs. You have built businesses, built and sold, and got acquired. And these days, you are very popular on TEDx. And when I talked to you, I looked up on the TEDx. Oh my goodness, that's an amazing story that you had on there. So maybe touch upon a little bit about your background. How did you get to writing a book and be in this particular, in the space that you currently are in?
Sure. I mean, look, I grew up in New York, in the suburbs of New York City. I was a pretty good athlete and decent student. And my dad was an entrepreneur. Started a software company that eventually IPO'd in his late 20s. So I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And back then, accumulating knowledge was much harder than it is now, right? You had to go to a library or go to a bookstore, right? There was no Amazon, there was no internet, there certainly wasn't any AI to speak of. So my journey, I've been a serial entrepreneur for the last 35 years, had some 8 and 9 figure exits. And, for me, the big turning point for me was, the topic that I cover in my TED talk, which is at the age of 24, I was misdiagnosed with terminal cancer by 3 different doctors and told I had 6 months to live. In fact, I had just got accepted into Wharton Business School and I was told I would be dead before I enrolled in the fall. So changed the entire trajectory of my life. And, it's been an interesting, part of the nexus for the life maxing book and concept came from 2 different areas. One, it came from the fact that I've never had what I would consider like a holistic mentor. I've had some business mentors. The problem with that, though, is, if someone's just like, oh yeah, work all the time and don't go to your kids, soccer game or baseball game, is that really the person you want to be taking advice from? They might be very professionally successful, but my experience is people that are professionally successful, often their relationships are terrible, their physical health isn't very good. And for me, because I was told I was going to die when I was 24, I don't take anything for granted. I'm super grateful for the fact that I'm alive, right? Let alone the fact that I've been fortunate enough to have some measure of success. So for me, because I didn't have that mentor myself, where they were holistic, where they were physically healthy, mentally healthy, successful, had good relationships, both with their spouse as well as their children and family and friends, I just never met that person. And so part of it is I try to be that person for other people that I mentor. And what got me thinking about it was one of the kids I'm mentoring now, one of the most capable and impressive human beings I've ever met. He's only 18 years old. He just turned 18, a couple months ago. And him and I are actually co-writing the Life Maxing book together. And the reason is, right now, when you think about who young children are following now, let's say people say 15 to 25, They're following Andrew Tate. They're following, Clavicular. That's where the whole looks maxing thing came from, hitting his face with a hammer, for God's sake. Even people like Jordan Peterson, who, while an interesting guy, not necessarily a happy guy, And so you
Yeah.
have a lot of these people, and you have people like Alex Hormozy and, grind, 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 work 24/7. You don't really see people that have holistically good lives. And my wife really encouraged me. She thinks that that's my greatest gift to humanity, is to sort of like, look, Dave, you're an unusually well-rounded person. You need to help other people understand how to get there. And I think that there is a way to do it. In fact, I think it's never been easier than it is now, because of the internet and AI, to be able to have an incredible life. People are really afraid of AI, and I understand that, and there are the things to be worried about. But man, there's so much good that's coming out of it. I just turned 60, and I've never been more excited about what's possible, because with AI, all things are possible.
Yeah, I think to all the listeners, I mean, what an amazing story Dave has. If you've not seen his TED talk, I would definitely recommend that. Right. So someone who has who was told that he has about 6 months to live at the age of 23, 24, and then coming back, bouncing back into life, and an amazing cheerful conduct that he's that Dave has in every single interaction that I've seen on various podcasts, on conversations. I think that's something to look for. So Dave, I think I'm super excited to be even talking to you, with the cheer that you bring into the conversation, with the with the pleasures of life that you constantly remind about, the way that you when you have this conversation. So thank you for not just being cheerful for yourself, and I'm guessing you might be listening to your wife more, and now mentoring and spreading the cheer around. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the kind words. It's very generous of you. I feel like I'm the lucky one. Honestly, it's one of the things that I really try to ingrain in the people that I coach and mentor is, don't think you're special. Think that you're fortunate. And those are very different things. And anyone born to the same DNA and circumstances as me would be me. And they'd accomplish the same things I accomplished. They'd fail at the same things I failed at. And so if I was born in sub-Saharan Africa dying of dysentery, it wouldn't matter how talented I was, how smart I was, how athletic I was, I'd die of dysentery. How fortunate that that's not the circumstances. I grew up with two loving parents who told me I could accomplish anything. That's not to say I didn't have any hardships or trials and tribulations. I had plenty. I was severely dyslexic, really severely dyslexic. I had an older brother that beat the crap out of me my entire childhood. My mom was an alcoholic. I could point to all these things and like, poor me. No, these are just things that happened to me. I don't frame anything that's happened to me as a trauma. I frame everything that happened to me as things that happened that I learned from. And so it's like, if you frame the world that way, you either win or you learn. And frankly, you don't really learn when you win. If I look at all of my positive qualities, none of them can I trace back to anything good that happened in my life. All of my best qualities I can trace back to something bad that happened, some hardship I had to overcome, some thing that went wrong that I had to, be, flexible and problem solve. So it's, if you reframe things that way, my God, it makes the journey so much easier.
Yeah, so maybe let me dive a little more deeper into that, Dave. You mentioned at several places, about your own journey, about your entrepreneurship, and you talked about that you did well monetarily, financially, but on the other side of the things, there were burnouts, and you see that, and I'm guessing you're seeing that with the current generation as well, balancing work life or money life. That balance is very, very difficult to attain. Any particular advice that you can maybe share about how do you balance the building the business versus really being successful, mentally healthy, mentally stable, and really, I think you use the word longevity. I love that word. Bringing longevity into the conversation. So, could you share maybe a little bit of tidbits? And before that, let me add a little bit of the context there as well. Our listeners are most of them are founders, most of them are growth leaders, and they are essentially looking at, in the last 5 6 years, whatever the businesses they have built, now there's a SaaS apocalypse kind of coming in, right? Their growth is down, their mental health is down. Everyone is trying to go build, build, build. AI is making it so much more easier to build, but such a very difficult, you know, time to sell, right? So growth is very, very difficult to have. And I think in such a junction, you come in with freshness and thoughts about, how do you manage the success beyond business? How do you still live a fulfillment life, no matter whether you're monetarily or financially healthy or not? So could you maybe share some thoughts on how does one go about, and maybe if you want to can maybe a story or two. I would love to live life through other stories as well.
So, so I have a few thoughts here. It's funny. I had a young CEO on my podcast about 2 weeks ago. I mean, this woman is so impressive. 24 years old, already has 130 clients, 30 employees. Really, impressive. And she actually asked me that exact question: how do I feel about work-life balance versus integration? And I do think that there is a time period where work life balance makes more sense. So, like for instance, when my daughter was growing up, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any of her soccer games, and I could coach her soccer team, or wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. It's not that my career didn't matter at all, but it took a little bit more of a back seat, and my risk tolerance was lower because I needed to be there, and so I was a little bit less, I was a little bit more risk averse during that period of time.
Mhm.
Once she went off to college, my risk profile changed dramatically, and the way I would say it is, except for maybe that period of time where you're really intensely involved in the raising of children, I think integration is the right way to go. And what I say by that is, right now, I mean, I'm sort of supposed to be semi-retired. I work 80 hours a week, but I'll use air quotes because I'm only doing things I like with people I enjoy, doing things I'm interested in. I don't work with any jerks. You know what I'm saying? And so if you and what this does come down to, though, is that means you have to hire well and you have to fire quickly when you make a hiring mistake. Because if you hire right and you have the right people on your team, then integration is the way to go. I don't have to be best friends with everyone I work with, but I want to like and enjoy the company of the people I work with, because that's the people I'm spending time with. I mean, I'll do these masterminds where we'll be in some exotic place for a week, and we're working, we're doing, we're but it doesn't feel like work. I'm in a cool place with people I like, talking about things I'm interested in. Like, is that work? Technically, I guess, but doesn't feel like it. And so to me, it's like, if you can curate the people around you, and this is the benefit of being the CEO, right, or being the leader of an organization, is your value system is the value system of the
Mhm.
organization. Because other advice I give to people that are taking a little bit more of a traditional career, the bigger the distance between your value system and the value system of the CEO, if it's this small of a difference, you're going to be happy. If it's this big of a difference, you're going to be very unhappy. And so, but the best thing about being the CEO is your value system is the value system of the organization. And then it's your job to fill the organization with people that have a similar moral compass to you. Like for me, I have never screwed someone over in a business deal ever in my entire life. I think about long term relationships. I've had people that have worked for me at 5 or 6 different companies because I always treat people fairly. And, I would argue that other people that take a much more cutthroat approach, they might do a little bit better than me in the short term, but in the medium and long term, I think I win every time.
So let me ask that. I think you used the word integration, and I think you also mentioned a couple of times about the founder's DNA. Gets kind of percolated back to the larger part of the organization. If they're happy, the organization somehow seems happy. If the founder treats people well, that becomes part and parcel of the culture. But on the other side, I'm guessing this is going to be a very obvious question, at least for the listeners out there. Is there's a lot of burnout that's happening because of the industry out there, right? There's a lot of people who are let go because of AI taking over their jobs, or the people who have the best AI knowledge are taking their jobs. So I see, since the time COVID hit us, right, around 2020, 2021, till now, right? There's constant flux, initially it was always about, hey, come to work, that's before COVID. And then now you can work from home, but you're working more. So there was no real, separation between work and life, right? So everything that you did, and in talking to most people, during that time, most people worked at least about 30 to 40% more than what they did when they went to work, right? And now when it comes down to it, there are people who are actually working much more than what it was earlier, because now they are using AI. There is a leadership, across the board, especially in the SaaS and the AI native space. There's a constant pressure to use AI, figure out, increase your productivity, right? Whatever you could produce, in 1 week, let's say you're able to produce 2 widgets in 1 week, now you're producing at least 4 to 7 times of those. So there's a constant pressure of improving productivity, and that's leading to a lot of burnout. So what advice do you have, on how to balance something like this? I'm sure, mentorship might help. I'm sure, you know integration into social life and all of that might help, but I think there's some missing piece. What do you advise the founders and their founding team on how should be their code of conduct in times which are going to be a lot more turbulent than what we have seen before?
A lot to unpack there. So my personal opinion is if someone is feeling burnout, that's a symptom of a different problem. It's not a symptom of, because let me ask you this. Let's say your job was to lay on a beach, drink margaritas, and count how many clouds there were. Okay. How likely would you be to feel burned out from that job? You might get a sunburn, but you probably wouldn't feel burned out in that job, right? And so I would argue that if you're feeling burned out, then
Unless,
you're doing,
if I can interrupt there,
yeah, yeah, of course.
unless somebody told you that you have to count exactly how many clouds are, and for every single cloud, they're going to give you $1,
Right.
right? And then the pressure takes in. So things that you love to do, now somebody put a price on it, right? And now you have to do it. Now it becomes a job, right? They liked it, but now somebody's asking you to, have better metrics around it. They would not like it. So I just want to have that
No,
clear.
no, your pushback's 100% right. But what I would argue though is that's a failure of that person's leadership. The fact that their leader is saying, "I'm only going to pay you for each cloud you count," right? That's the problem, right? So the burnout got created by poor leadership in that example would be my argument. So for me, like the people that I'll give you an example. When I was running this, I was CEO of a Forex prop trading company in my headquartered in Miami, and you know, many of the people on my sort of executive team were working 60, 70 hours a week. None of them felt burned out. And the reason they didn't feel burned out is because they were completely supported in everything they were trying to do. If they needed time off for things, they got time off for whatever they needed, so long as they, let me give me a heads up, and we have a, how to cover things while they're gone. And they had autonomy to make decisions the way they needed to make decisions, so they felt empowered and that they had agency in what they were doing. So if you allow people to do things, and again, it all does require you to hire the right people in the first place, because that leadership style will not work with the wrong hire. But with the right hire, you can give people real autonomy, give them the resources they need, give them the support and the vision that they need to help be excited about what they're doing. And then the last thing that I would do is every person on my team had equity, because I want them excited about what they're doing. Hey, I'm not just putting in all this work to make Dave and the other shareholders more money. I'm making more for me, and I'm helping, feather my nest for retirement because of the effort that I'm putting in. So I think it comes down to alignment, incentive alignment. It comes down to leadership style, that if you do those things right, something that might create burnout in one situation can get people super excited in the other situation.
All right. So let me maybe, touch upon two or three more things that you have mentioned, and at a couple of times. I think you talked about hiring the right people, especially the right leaders, right? There's many books that's been written about, what needs to be asked of them, but I think in most times, hiring leaders is very, very different than hiring the people under them who's actually working towards it. What, could you maybe share your thoughts on four or five things that one should, a founder, when they're looking for hiring the leader, especially to bring in the culture that you mentioned about, how should they go about it?
Yeah, great question. The two biggest qualities that I look for across all hires, but especially leaders, is humility and curiosity, right? The person who's curious may not start as the smartest person in the room, but the most curious person will ultimately be the smartest person in the room because they do a lot more listening than they do talking. The humility is really important, especially among people that are capable, because capable people, understandably, could sometimes get a bit of an ego, and having someone that has enough ego to drive them but enough humility to take in new information is critical. I mean, I had I'll give you an example. I pride myself on the fact that I have very, very strong positions, loosely held. So I have very strong opinions about things, but I can be persuaded very easily that I'm wrong because I'm always open to being wrong. If you're absolutely brilliant, you're still wrong something like 30% of the time. How could you be sure this isn't part of that 30%? And maybe you're not that brilliant, right? But I had a situation where my head of marketing, so that Forex prop trading company, I had made a decision. My head of client services had convinced me to make a decision. It was the wrong decision to make. My head of marketing came to me and was like, Dave, I have to be honest, I'm a little bit upset and disappointed that you didn't talk to me before you made this decision. And I was like, because he was the right hire. He explained to me why he felt the way he did. He was 100% right. I was 100% wrong. I was
Mhm.
like, Alex, 100% my mistake. I'm reversing my decision. We're going to do it the way you suggested. It won't happen again. And that's what a good leader does. A good leader has the humility to be able to own the fact that they make mistakes and fall on your sword and fall on your sword hard. The other two things that I think big leadership mistakes people make is, as a leader, your job is to absorb as much blame as possible and to deflect as much credit as possible. And not in a manipulative way, but if you're being honest, if something, you're no one's an island, right? So if your team is executing on a plan, even if it's your plan, your strategy, your tactics, they're the ones doing the work. They deserve a lot of the credit, even if it's your strategy. And not only that, but if you can integrate them into developing the strategy, even if you're the driving force behind it, they're going to feel a lot more invested in it, in getting the right outcome. The other thing is, when things go wrong, by definition, if I'm the leader, it's my
Mhm.
fault. I hired wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't have the right resources. They didn't have the right training. Like, at the end of the day, it's always my fault. So I try to absorb as much blame, deflect as much credit. And if you do that, your team will love you. It's the reason why I've had people follow me from company to company is I always put the employee, and if I don't even like to use the word employee, I like to call them coworkers. I always put all my coworkers first and the company second. And the reason I do that is because by putting the company second, I actually put the company first. That's what's going to get me the best result. And it's a little counterintuitive, but I have 35 years of experience that have taught me when I put my team first, I get the best result every time.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'm going to use that in the some of the rapid fire questions that we'll have at the end as well, right? Company first, employees first. We'll talk through that. I think, Dave, your experience is extremely rich. Not a lot of people have gone through this experience where they built large companies when they were young, right? They have mentored, other folks when they are, still successful, right? And then continue on that particular path. A question to you: have you seen founders who are going through the journey of scaling their businesses, right? They change, they significantly change in the beginning of their company stages. They would act very differently, and all of that. Over a period of time, they change significantly. So there are, two aspects of it. One is, how should the founders think about graduating their own capabilities in terms of leadership as the companies are going from stage to stage, right? So from small to big to bigger and bigger, and so on and so forth. And the second question I have is, as the scaling happens, how should they start thinking about building the company culture, right? The company culture is typically the you know, last point on anybody's agenda, right? So every growth leader or every leader in the founding business would be, customers, more customers, more money, right? More productivity. But what gets left on the wayside is actually the company building or the company culture building. So any thoughts on scaling businesses and and culture building?
I could talk for hours, but I'll give you the short version. I think that, like anything that's done with intention is going to give you a much better result than something that's done through inertia, right? And unfortunately, most company cultures are just inertia. They're growing, they get clients, they lose clients, they have things go right, they have things go wrong, they raise capital, whatever. They have these things, and they just go in different directions through the inertia of who gets hired or whatever it might be. One of the things I started doing about 10 years ago, and I wish I had done it sooner, is every company that I run or every company that I mentor, I insist that they have two sets of core values: an internal set of core values and an external set of core values. And I make sure that like, as the leader, I certainly have input into those and I have final say, but I have the entire executive team, in fact the entire organization, weighs in on what those internal and external core values are. The internal core values are what is used to hire, reward, promote, people within the organization. So it might be things like, maybe it's grit or discipline or integrity or whatever those are. They basically, when I'm thinking about, hey, am I going to hire this person? Am I going to promote this person? Am I going to give this person a raise? Am I going to give this person leadership, responsibilities? I have to run them through that core value filter, right? And if someone doesn't meet those core values, they don't get the promotion, they don't get hired, maybe they're not part of the team anymore. I do the same thing. The external core values are more around the who I partner with, the products and services that we offer, how we deal with. So anything that I'm going to do related to the product or the service who I'm going to partner with, that has to be run through the filter of the external core values. And because everyone in the team, everyone in the company is involved in selecting those core values, people really get bought into it. And then the other thing that I do, that's worked so well, is usually it's four internal core values. As the CEO, the very first time we do it, So I basically create an award for each of the four core values, and every quarter those get awarded to someone else. So I do it the first time. I say it's grit and discipline and integrity and curiosity. Let's say there'll be an award for each of those four. I'll award the first one, and then it's that person's responsibility at the end of the next quarter to award that to somebody else, and they get both the award and they get a small monetary prize, and that way it reinforces those core values. Because ultimately, and then the last thing that is probably obvious but has to be said, is the leader has to live by those values. It's just like being a parent. If you do one thing and say another, people are going to look at what you do, not what you said, right? So if I say integrity is really important but I act without integrity, then the core value is worthless, right? So you have to walk the walk, for sure.
Those are amazing tidbits. I will actually use that as a short clippings and as magic clips, and I think those are really amazing, to bring in. I know we are running out of time, but let me ask. All right, so why don't we jump into some of the rapid fire questions, right? So we've not touched, a couple of areas that we really wanted to touch upon, but maybe we can cover that as per the rapid fire. So the way that I'm structuring the rapid fire is I'm going to ask you a set of questions, maybe about 5 or 7 of them, and if you can answer very briefly, right, maybe in one word or one sentence, or not maybe one or not more than 1 or 2 sentences, if you will, right? And if you can also explain why you think on that particular direction. So let me start with the first one that we touched upon: employee first or customer first?
Employee first.
Okay.
If you take care of your employees, again, I like to call them coworkers, they'll take care of the customer.
Okay, all right, so that that's your relationship there. Okay, the second one is biggest AI trend that you see happening, to the people that you mentor or the company that you mentor?
AI has to be embraced by every organization. It's literally either get on the bus or the bus is going to run you over. So, like, you need to, I don't care what role you have to go down the AI rabbit hole and become an expert. You just have to. It's a non-negotiable. If you're a leading, it doesn't matter what your role. You could be CEO, you could be, dishwasher. It doesn't matter. Everyone needs to go down the AI rabbit hole.
Okay, that's good. So everyone needs to be at least AI literate if not to be AI proficient. The next question: anything that has surprised you in terms of mentorship, meaning something that you attempted to bring in, a change in the people that you're mentoring, and it went completely opposite than what you expected.
Maybe not recently, just because I've been doing it for 30 years. What I will say though is, I guess the part that surprised me the most about being a mentor is I learn at least as much from mentoring as I think they learn from me. And that was a genuine surprise to me.
That's an amazing answer. Next question: happiness of your wife first, or your family first, or happiness of your employees first? Slightly controversial, but let's see how you think about it.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. If I have to pick between my wife being happy or my family being happy or my coworkers being happy, I've done something wrong. I would argue I've screwed something up. So now again, I think it comes down to picking the right wife and picking the right employees. So as an example, like I might say to my wife, "Hey, I'll be done by 7," and then it's 9, and she's not giving me a hard time. She's like, "Dave, I'm so grateful that you're working so hard to provide for us as a family. Can I bring you dinner? Can I have a warm bath ready for you when you get home?" Like that to me is when you pick the right wife, when you pick the right team, they're supportive of everything you're doing, and they feel like we're all in this together. So I feel like if you're having to pick, you've set it up wrong.
Okay. And one last question, again, slightly controversial. How can you tell a leader is faking it or is genuinely a leader?
The only measure of whether you're a good leader is if the people you lead think you're a good leader. Okay, that is the only measurement that matters. So whether I'm faking it or not, because I would argue that everyone feels some level of imposter syndrome. I'm as experienced as they come, and I feel it all the time. Like, why would someone want me on their podcast? Why would someone take advice from me? Yes, objectively, I know I've had some success and all of that, but we all feel it. In fact, I would argue that feeling imposter syndrome is a symptom of having a reasonable level of humility. And so, that's the way I think about it. I just feel like otherwise you can get yourself in real trouble.
Okay, there you go. That's life maxing, guys. I think to all the listeners out there, you can actually reach out to Dave Guttman on his website, guttmanmedia.com. We'll actually put that in the show notes as well. I also love his YouTube channel. I think it's called Real Dave Guttman. I know another person who tweets on Real dash dash. You know who I'm talking about, but this is Real Dave Guttman. So thank you, Dave. I really enjoyed this conversation and hope all the listeners did as well. Dave, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best mechanism that they can reach out to you?
So across all my socials, I'm at Real Dave Guttman. I'm David at GuttmanMedia.com. People can, email me directly, DM me directly. I respond to everything. Again, I'm here to serve. There's nothing that feels better to me than being useful. I think I'm pretty useful. And so, my wife gives me a hard time sometimes, but that's how I want to travel through life.
Well, Dave, thank you for being a real gentleman, a real leader in your space. Again, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to host you on this.